When I look back at my photography from over the past 17 years, there's so many things that I wish I'd known sooner. Small problems that could have been fixed much earlier if I'd have known how to. In this video, I want to share some of those common issues and more importantly, how you can fix them too. So if you're facing similar challenges to me, these tips will hopefully help you overcome them quickly and keep you enjoying your photography for longer. Plus, I've got a few bonus tips sprinkled throughout the video as well, so please be sure to stick around as you won't want to miss out on those. So if you're new here, my name is Ian Worth and I'm a professional landscape photographer based here in the UK, and I create weekly videos centered around outdoor photography. So without further ado, let's get into this week's video. First up, I want to talk about camera settings, and honestly, I think this is the least important part of what we'll be covering in today's video, and here is why. So I actually think learning camera technique is probably one of the easiest things to learn. You know, you can do it from the comfort of a cozy chair in your office or in your living room. You can watch tons of videos about the exposure triangle and other technical aspects, and you can do it at your own leisure as and when required. So I'm going to keep this section very brief. That said, to take a photo you're truly happy with, I think it's important to consider what it is that you're trying to achieve. Taking a photo is easy, isn't it? Even if you don't understand the exposure triangle, you know, you can put your camera into auto mode, press the shutter and get a nicely exposed image. But, you know, while this can work well in some situations, the real magic happens when you start thinking creatively, doesn't it? For landscape photography, I always shoot in full manual mode because I want full control over my aperture, shutter speed and ISO. And when taking an image, my first considerations are as follows. How do I want the scene to look? Do I want a large or shallow depth of field? Do I want to freeze motion or show it? Am I shooting handheld or on a tripod? These questions guide my settings and help me to avoid getting too bogged down by the camera itself, letting me stay focused on what really matters, and that's creating an image I've pre-visualized in my mind. So I think having a simple workflow really helps you to make the most of those amazing moments when, you know, everything comes together, because quite often you just don't have a lot of time. This brings me to my next point, which is understanding light. So unlike camera settings, I feel this is something that takes years to master. In fact, I don't think you ever stop learning when it comes to light. Every time you experiment, there's always a takeaway. Now, I guess it might not always be a positive one, but if you look closely, there's always something to learn from every photograph that you take. Like I mentioned, I've been working as a photographer for 17 years now, and I still feel like I learn something new every time I go out and shoot with my camera. And honestly, I think that's the most amazing thing, isn't it, about photography? It's a constant learning journey, as cheesy as that sounds. So if you're an outdoor photographer or just learning photography in general, you've probably heard people say you should be shooting during the golden hour for the best light. Now, while that can be true, I firmly believe there's always something to shoot no matter what the light is like. It's just about finding the right subject for the conditions that you currently have. And I think building that understanding of light and subject matter will open up so many doors and make shooting throughout the day way more enjoyable as well. Take this shot, for example. It was taken in dull, overcast, boring conditions. But the flat light made the minimalist composition feel calm, and it really helped the leaf pop against the juniper haircap and moss below. Had this been in, say, direct sunlight, the contrast would have been unmanageable in my opinion. This shot was taken 20 minutes after sunset on a clear blue sky day. The soft blue light from the sky filled the shadows with cool tones that enhanced the contours of the rocks. Both of these images would have looked completely different, and in my opinion worse, if they'd been shot in direct light or in the golden hour. And if you're interested in learning more about light for outdoor photography, I've written a free 30-page guidebook called Light in the Landscape. You can download it for free when you sign up to my weekly photography newsletter. The link is down in the description if you fancy checking that out. But anyway, here's the thing. If we only shoot in the so-called best light or golden hour, I think we're really limiting ourselves to what we can capture. The more time we spend shooting, the more chance we, give ourselves to sort of capture something that we're truly proud of. Some of my most favourite photos are taken at probably the most unexpected times. And I think that's the beauty of keeping an open mind and experimenting with different subjects in different lighting conditions. Next, I want to talk about composition, and for me, this is the single biggest area I think every photographer should focus on. I'm absolutely obsessed with it. When we think about composition, we often hear about rules, don't we? Like the rule of thirds, for example, but I prefer to think of these as techniques. They're tools to help you tell your story or convey your message, and I think they work best when used with intention. That said, using techniques like the rule of thirds when they're not necessary can actually have the opposite effect, I think. Take the leaf shot that I showed before. I like the leaf right in the centre. If I'd have placed it on one of the thirds, I don't think the image would have worked quite as well for me. Similarly, in this black and white shot, if I'd have placed the horizon on the third line, it would have revealed a dull and empty section of sky that's currently cropped out. So while these common techniques are really useful, it's really about trusting your eye and thinking about what looks right to you. I think ultimately what you like is the most important thing. The more you enjoy your own work, the more inspired you'll feel to go out and shoot more, which means you're going to create more photos, and it's one of the best ways to learn. One of the best ways to improve your composition is by evaluating your own work. So after a shoot, take some time to look through your photos and try to identify 5 ways each one could be improved. Experiment with things like the crop tool and removing distractions, and think about how you might simplify the image to tell the story more clearly. And be really honest with yourself as well. Could different lighting improve the composition as well? If you can come up with 3 or more things to improve, jot down what conditions would best suit your new ideas, and if possible, go back and reshoot the image. Keep repeating this process until you feel you've captured the best possible version of that shot. Obviously, this is more difficult if you've travelled miles and miles, but this is a great exercise to do if you're shooting close to home. And by doing this, you'll constantly learn and refine your techniques. Let's take a look at this shot from the Isle of Skye in Scotland, which I'm very fond of. How could this image be improved? So for me, there are 3 things that I think I could do to improve this shot. First, better light on the mountains in the background would make a big difference. Second, I think the image would be stronger if the ocean had a bit more wave action to add some energy to it. And third, the large expanse of water in the middle makes the foreground and the background feel a bit disconnected. If I position my camera a little lower, I could have reduced that section, helping to tie the image together more effectively. Right now, the shot feels like it's in 2 halves, and it's unclear whether the focus should be on the foreground or the background. To get the light on those mountains, I need to shoot this scene in December instead of March when I shot it. And by analysing these details, we can not only better prepare ourselves for a revisit, but also equip ourselves with valuable knowledge to make improvements to all of our photos moving forward. If we know what we like, we're going to take better photos. I've got a couple of bonus tips for you before I wrap this video up. So, one of the most common issues I hear about, and something I've struggled with in the past myself, is photos not being sharp. And people often ask, is it my lens, is my gear good enough, etc. And the truth is, in most cases, it's not the lens or the equipment, it's poor technique. And I've been there myself, thinking my lens wasn't up to scratch, only to find out after testing the problem was my own approach. So here's some common issues of soft images. First, your aperture might be stopped down too much. So when you close your aperture beyond, say, f11, really small, you start to lose sharpness due to diffraction. And this happens with high-end lenses as much as it does with lower-end ones. If you need a large depth of field, consider using an f number like f7.1 or f8 and focus stacking your shot instead. This way you'll get maximum sharpness and the required depth of field. Keep in mind that the higher resolution your camera sensor, the sooner diffraction kicks in. For example, with my XH2 here, it's got a 40 megapixel sensor and diffraction can start as early as f7.1. And in my opinion, it's one of the trade-offs with high resolution sensors. Next is camera shake. So to avoid this, make sure your shutter speed is fast enough, especially if you're shooting handheld or if it's windy while you've got your camera on a tripod. A good rule of thumb here is to make sure your shutter speed matches or exceeds the focal length that you're using. So for example, if I've got a 50mm lens on, my shutter speed should be 1/50th of a second or faster. If you're using a stabilised lens or camera though, you might be able to shoot at much lower shutter speeds, but you're going to need to test that out for yourself to see what your technique and your gear can handle. Then there's movement within your scene, which we touched on a little bit earlier. So when photographing distant fields or trees, it's easy to overlook how quickly these fine details can move, especially when it's very, very windy. So you might actually need a faster shutter speed than you think to freeze that motion. To check this, what I do is take some test shots and then zoom into my LCD and adjust it if I need to. It can be really easy to overlook this if you've not got something in your immediate foreground in your viewfinder. Also, I'd encourage you not to get too bogged down with camera gear. The more gear you carry, the heavier your load will be and the faster you will tire out. Staying motivated and fresh in the field can be the difference, I think, between, say, coming home with a really, really good shot and coming home with absolutely nothing. So having less gear can also help reduce indecisiveness as well. So for example, if you only have a standard zoom lens fixed on your camera, yes, your options might be more limited, but you'll have a clearer idea of the shots that you can achieve with that lens, and that can be a huge advantage. Use and master what you have as opposed to fixating on what you would like. And I'm telling that to myself as well, by the way. So by combining light, camera technique and understanding compositional skills and putting all of that into a simple, streamlined workflow, you can make your photography process much more efficient and way more enjoyable. I think having a clear, straightforward approach has definitely helped me to focus on what matters most. And that's picking up the camera, getting out there and just enjoying the day out and taking photos. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to check out the one that's linked up there. You might find that helpful too. And the link over here will take you to my guidebook, Light in the Landscape, which I'm sure you'll enjoy, and it's completely free. That's also linked down in the description. Anyway, I hope to see you all again next week. Take care.